Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, audiences ran away from this one in a serpentine pattern. This is Land of the Lost. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Land of the Lost, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, I'm not John Krasinski, but here's some good news.
Oh, boy.
I've been taking 3 new herbal supplements, which I believe may be helping my joints, my brain, and my guts, respectively. And so all of that stuff is feeling slightly less broken down and creaky. And, that's as good as the news gets these days.
Nice. What are you taking for your joints?
The glucosamine and chondroitin combo, I think it is.
Oh, yeah. I think we talked about this at some point.
Yeah.
If you lift weights and you start getting into like your mid-30s, you have to start worrying about your joints. So I was having some serious tennis elbow.
Oh, okay. Did you take something that helps?
Yeah, I started taking the glucosamine a couple of years ago, and it's made a big difference.
Yeah, I think it's helping me too.
I think fish oil is good for your joints too. I take some fish oil, but then you start burping up fish. That's not great.
Yeah.
But I'm happy you're getting some respite from the heat and the humidity because we're not. This is a first for the Blast Zone. I am podcasting in a tank top, which has never happened before.
Some call it risque, but we're willing to push the edge here.
My office, my recording studio, if you will, does not have AC.
No.
So I have an adjoining room, AC on, and the door open and trying to cool down. But, it's steadily creeping up as my computer goes.
Yeah.
So, all right. I guess we got to. Oh, it's show and tell time. I almost forgot.
Yeah.
Ian, I think we both have movies this week. We're not doing any fucking TV shows. I don't know that bullshit. We're going to the theater this week.
The theater of my laptop screen. I went there and I saw The Fall Guy, which is a brand new, almost blockbuster from the summer of 2024. Didn't quite bust, but.
Did it? I think it did.
It was one of those that it definitely didn't meet expectations when it opened, but then it had some legs. And so it's maybe working itself into the gray zone.
Nah, dog.
No?
$150 million budget, $177 million return. That's bomb territory for sure.
All right. Fall Guy fell. It's directed by David Leitch, who's not coincidentally a decorated stuntman and stunt coordinator himself before he became the director of movies like Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, Bullet Train. All of his movies haven't been hits, but I think this one, he really hit the mark.
Bullet Train was a nice hit. That was a hit for him.
Oh, okay.
Deadpool 2, of course. Hobbs and Shaw, I think, was a hit too. Yeah. Oh, wow. Hobbs and Shaw cleared $750 million.
Oh, wow. So this won't hurt him too much. But he did a movie that's about the world that he comes from, action movies and stunts. And it turns out it's actually a really fun action movie and it has great stunts. But for me, even better than that is that it's a legit rom-com. And between the stars, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, they nail both the rom and the com.
Nice.
It's great to see our guy Gosling back in a pure comedy reminiscent of what we loved about him in Nice Guys. And speaking of Nice Guys, directed by Shane Black, this movie was written by Drew Pearce, who co-wrote Iron Man 3 with Shane Black. So there's like a little thread of Hollywood continuity there. But the writing's really good. Besides having big action set pieces, it has romantic dialogue set pieces between the two stars that develops their relationship and it makes you feel feelings about them. And I was like, I had a really good time watching this movie.
I mean, you've sold me. I skipped Fall Guy when it came out, when it hit streaming. It's got all the makings of a movie I'd probably enjoy, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't feeling it. But I think you've turned it around, that I'm going to check it out because also exciting news about Drew Pearce. He's directed a movie. Do you know which movie he directed?
No.
Hotel Artemis, which is going to be a future episode of the pod.
Oh, wow.
Brian Tyree Henry, Jodie Foster, quite a cast in that one, but it was lambasted as being a Wick ripoff, which is kind of funny because he's working with one of the original architects of the Wickverse.
Yeah.
And Leitch. Because, Leitch directed the first John Wick, but he wasn't credited. He co-directed it with his buddy.
I read that. They directed it together, but he didn't get director credit.
Which sucks, but it seems like he's doing well for himself. But yeah, The Fall Guy, it has all the makings of a movie I'd enjoy, and I'm also a big Emily Blunt fan. I think Baby Goose, he was trying to do, maybe less successfully, what he's doing in this movie, in The Gray Man, because that was like an action movie with a very comedic bent, but it had that kind of Marvel style comedy where it's just,
Yeah.
that just happened.
I did not enjoy anything in the hour or so that I made myself sit through that movie before I turned it off.
I saw the whole thing, and let me tell you, it only gets worse. So you saw a big, bombastic, big budget action movie. I'm going another way. I wanted to bring a movie that dropped in 2023 that I had no inkling even existed until a couple weeks ago. But I actually sent you the trailer. I was like, this looks pretty cool. And it's The Royal Hotel. Not a big cast, and even most of the cast is relatively unknown, but the names you will recognize in it are Julia Garner.
Okay.
It's been popping off in a big way the last couple of years. She was the highlight of Ozark for me. And then she starred in The Assistant, which I think I brought to a very early show and tell on the pod many years ago, which was like a ground level look at what it might have been like working for a Harvey Weinstein type figure.
Oh, okay.
It was quite good, but it's like a very quiet, very subtle movie, which is how I would also describe The Royal Hotel. But we've also got Jessica Henwick, who's been in lots of stuff, and she's always a blast. Most people probably know her from Glass Onion most recently, but she was also in all those Netflix Marvel shows like Iron Fist and also The Gray Man, unfortunately.
Oh, there you go.
And a borderline unrecognizable Hugo Weaving as a bar owner, but he's got a big old gray beard. I was like, that guy's a good actor. I was like, did he just get into acting late in life? No, it's fucking Hugo Weaving. And it takes place in Australia, in the Australian outback. They're basically American backpackers who run out of money, go to a talent agency, try to get some temp work, and they are shipped off to work at a bar in a mining town in like the middle of nowhere in Australia.
Ooh.
And it's marketed a lot like a horror movie, but it's not quite a horror movie. Although horrible things do happen, I would say it's more of a thriller. And its thesis statement is, dudes, they don't rock. And I've seen some criticism of the movie, like, nothing happens. Why didn't they just leave? But that's just dudes being stupid. It's a very affecting movie about how men will act when they know they have a captive audience that can't exactly just walk away from them whenever they want to.
Sounds creepy.
It's creepy. There's a lot of dread and a lot of threatening scenes, but like it holds back on the outright kind of more lurid details. Because I don't think you need that. I think it says what it's trying to say strongly enough without that. It's a nice middle ground. Like you don't have to show what could have happened. We all know. We get it.
Right.
But really well acted, very breezy, not breezy, but short, 92 minutes or something like that. And it's streaming on Hulu, which is where I just came across it and decided to check out the trailer. So I give it a recommendation. Don't go into it expecting fireworks. It's a slow burn, but a good one.
You know, the Aussies do like creepy, greasy, dusty, thriller, spooky stuff really well. They have a certain aesthetic that they can just really nail.
That's our boy Macon Blair and Blue Ruin. That's like a very...
Oh, okay.
Although that one, the violence does explode at some point, and boy, does it ever. But it does a nice build up. I can't remember the director's name. He always works with Macon Blair. Jeremy Saulnier.
Okay. I was thinking of The Stranger. Remember The Stranger?
Is that like when you sit on your hand till it gets numb?
Yeah. I was going to show you how to do that trick.
Talk about the Billy Joel album? No, The Stranger. Tell me about it.
Well, I can't because I forgot the names of the people in it. And there's too many things called The Stranger as I Google it. It's the one with...
Australian crime thriller 2022. Oh, Joel Edgerton.
Edgerton. And it's Sean Harris is the other actor. It's like a cop and a creepy dude.
Yeah, I loved The Stranger.
Playing a cat and mouse game.
Man, I just watched it like a few months ago, but that's not a good name for a movie at this point.
No.
It's a forgettable name. But yeah, the poster is just Joel Edgerton with a big old beard.
Billy Joel Edgerton. It's The Stranger.
Was that one of his doo-wop albums? Or no, that was 80s. Billy Joel. Stranger was 70s.
Yeah.
80s doo-wop. Billy Joel sucks. To quote Step Brothers. Speaking of Step Brothers, look at that segue.
Way to bring it around.
Let's talk about Land of the Lost here now. Do you remember when this movie came out? Do you remember anything about it? Did you know it existed but chose to spend your money and time elsewhere?
I think I'm in that last category. I think in 2009, I was at a place in my life where I wasn't particularly down to reboot my childhood. And also, I remember hearing about this movie and the word on the street was that it sucked. So I didn't pay any attention to it. But you would think now this movie would attract more of my attention because of the people involved and the potential that it should have had.
That's something we got to talk about, is that people might look at this cast list and be like, wow, what are they talking about? No stars. But like Danny McBride wasn't Danny McBride yet. Jorma wasn't Jorm. Will Ferrell was Will Ferrell. And that's how this movie got made with its budget that it did. Right. But there wasn't a lot of buzz around it. I remember it came out. I did not see it. We'll talk about why when I get into my monologue. But I definitely saw it pretty soon after it hit home media, either on Blu-ray or streaming, some primitive form of 2009 streaming, perhaps. But I couldn't tell you if I liked it, hated it, what I thought about it, any good lines from it except Serpentine. That was featured very prominently in all the marketing.
Okay.
And that line does work on me when he's running away because he's so slow and unathletic. But I knew it crashed and burned. I didn't realize just how badly it did compared compared to its budget. It's a miracle all these guys went on to have careers, because this is like an Evan Almighty sized catastrophe. Not financially necessarily, but I think it got almost identically bad reviews, like the same Rotten Tomato score. But this movie, and I know you agree because we talked about it off mic, it has such a tone problem. This feels like a movie that got neutered in the edit.
It does. I think that's both of our key theory to understanding the movie is like, what was it going to be versus what they eventually edited and put out into theaters. And those were probably pretty different things. When you compare it to Evan Almighty, which also had a big tone problem and a big question of who is this for, I forgive this movie a lot more. Maybe it's just the
style. I laughed occasionally
because I'm a grown-up and they were at least trying to do grown-up humor, even though they cut themselves off at the knees at certain points.
Yeah, it's a weird grab bag of grown-up humor and the most sophomoric bodily humor jokes you could imagine, which is it's just not my flavor of comedy. I've never been a fan of that kind of humor. I think it works when you drop in a joke like that into a movie that hasn't just been that nonstop. It can have that shock value, but like,
right,
this movie has a bodily fluid set piece like every 20 minutes, like clockwork. When it becomes very tiresome after a while.
The fluids guy was working overtime on this set, man. A lot of fluids.
And to your point, it's none of the sexy fluids, all the gross ones.
Yeah, they had to de-sex the fluids and just go straight for gross out. The main problem with the comedy in this movie, to me, was like, it's not grounded. It's all bits. And that's our other theory that I think we'll probably go over as we go through it scene by scene. Everybody's doing bits. Is anyone ever genuine? I guess a little bit. They try to do like the genuine breakdown moment and have an emotional coming together, but it's so surface. And the rest of the time, it's not that you need to really relate to comedy movie characters as real people, but you need somebody to behave normally so that makes the weirdos look weird, right?
Right. Yeah. You have no tether to reality in this movie.
Yeah.
It has the flavor of a bunch of friends just sitting around high riffing, but then somebody gave them $100 million to turn that into a movie. And like, you need to edit yourself at some point. You need a grown-up in the room. And I think the grown-ups didn't hit the room till it was filmed. And they were like, what can we salvage? Because this movie did, spoiler alert, it did go to the MPAA and come back with an R, which would have been an absolute death sentence, even more so than it already was, to have a Will Ferrell-led dinosaur comedy that was rated R. Nobody's going to go see that. So they had to remake it in the edit, I think, is what happened. And we got this weird kind of hodgepodge.
Yeah, I was thinking that as I was like making my notes and developing my criticism of like, oh, they took the edge off. It should have been much more raunchy and bawdy and gone there with the sex jokes that it almost like it seems to be walking towards one and then it takes a little bit of a turn and neuters it. And then I'm like, but would I have liked the movie if this was a super horny sex comedy that it almost was? Would I have liked that movie more? I'm not sure. I might have been offended by that too.
Can't really think of the last super horny sex comedy we got.
I know. I had to go back. I'm like, what am I thinking of as the example? And I had to go back to like Porky's in the 80s.
I mean, I don't think you have to go that far back because there is American Pie.
That's true.
And if you want to go even a little more recent, there was like the Euro Trip Road Trip duo,
I didn't see
which
those.
were unrelated movies, but both had that vibe. And then you do see like direct to streaming ones, I think, more often than you'd see theatrical ones, but they're typically of very low quality. Those movies, I don't know about Porky's. I don't think I've ever actually seen Porky's, but at least like American Pie and all, like those movies did have a heart at their core too.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those are set in much more conventional settings with more conventional characters like students and campers and stuff that we like, okay, we understand why these people are horny because they're young people. And yes, that motivates all the plot in the movie, but it kind of hangs together. And here, the reason these people do things would probably make more sense if it was because every one of them was horny in their own way, but it also would be like, oh, why'd you make Land of the Lost horny? That would also be a question to ask.
I've got our comparable.
Okay.
Evolution.
Yes.
That's a horny sci-fi comedy that bombed at the box office, which you've already covered. That felt like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be R-rated or PG, so it settled for PG-13 and nobody was happy. And this movie does the same thing that Evolution did that we decried at the time, which is you might have 4 Venkmans in this movie.
Yes.
Are they all Venkmans? Like,
yep.
Even Chaka is a little bit of a Venkman. Like,
I mean, Chaka may be the only one, maybe not designed in pure Venkman mold, but a pure comedy character, right? Chaka is ridiculous on his face.
Literally on his face. It's tough to look at, Chaka is, as you so eloquently put it. For newer listeners that haven't listened to the Evolution episode, our theory is that Orlando Jones and David Duchovny are both playing the Bill Murray in Ghostbusters role, which doesn't work. You need him to be the foil. But when they bounce off each other, you're just kind of like, these dudes are gross and I hate them.
Somebody should be straight-laced and pulling the other one back. And you go, okay, when in a trio where one of them's the woman and she's in literal jeopardy of becoming too obviously a sex object, then you make the woman pull back. But at least they didn't go straight with that because that sucks to force the woman to be the straight person because she's in literal danger if she doesn't rein her colleagues in.
And that harkens back to, I think, one of the complaints about the Apatow movies, specifically from like Katherine Heigl, is that the women are all like the wet blankets.
Yeah, they're scolds and they're...
I think she had, I think she was vilified for it at the time, but in hindsight, she does have a point that like the dudes just get to be gross, incompetent child men, and the women have to rein them in all the time.
Right. No, that's a good point. So the kudos that they observe that.
The movie does get a little credit for not doing that. Yeah,
exactly. But it makes it goofier. But Anna Friel's pretty good. I think we're going to praise the little bit of work that she does in this.
Yeah, we both made a note. I almost called it out in the notes. This is creepy watching her make out with Will Ferrell. Like, they're only 8 years apart. I think this just goes to show that maybe our boy Will has not taken the best care of himself throughout his life.
I mean, he was boyish in his cheerleader sweater, but he always looked like an overgrown man.
Yeah, I feel like he's looked 50 for about 30 years now.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Which could be worse. He could have looked 20 for 30 years and all of a sudden hit 80, which is what happens to some actors. But
it does.
No, he's been consistently 50 years old for as long as I've seen him on screen. All right, do you want me to get into the making of this movie a little bit?
Yeah, I think we set it up pretty well. Let's hear how this thing came together.
All right. Wouldn't it be funny if Will Ferrell was a scientist? That's basically the thesis statement at work in 2009's Land of the Lost, a reboot, in name only, of the children's adventure TV series which debuted in 1974. The show wasn't exactly a hit while it aired, but it built up a cult following due to heavy syndication.
And heavy breathing by the Sleestacks.
The series had actually already been rebooted once, with ABC airing 2 seasons of their Land of the Lost in the early 90s. But Will Ferrell was a fan of the original show, and with his popularity at its height in the late aughts, he planned to star in his own version with longtime collaborator Adam McKay directing. Universal Studios was on board as distributor, and the film was given a massive $100 million budget, with an extremely small cast of which Will Ferrell was the only real star at the time, unless you count Matt Lauer.
You shouldn't.
It stands to reason that most of the budget was going to special effects. Anna Friel, Danny McBride, and Jorma Taccone filled out the rest of the cast. With only a small collection of scenes being filmed on set, the majority of filming was done in various desert locales around California, including Dumont Dunes and the La Brea Tar Pits. Additional filming was done in Lancaster, California, and Trona, California.
Proving California is truly the land of the lost.
Filmed over the summer of 2008, the film had a lengthy post-production cycle ahead of its June 5th, 2009 release date. But the movie was in for one hell of a hangover. I mean that literally, as it released the same day as The Hangover, which would go on to be a massive surprise hit, eventually earning just under $500 million worldwide.
Let me get this straight. Losing a lad is bad, but losing a groom is great.
While The Hangover was rated R, there was still plenty of competition for a family comedy at the time, with Up barely losing to The Hangover in its second week, and Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian being in its third week.
World your ass fucking movie name.
Land of the Lost flopped hard with a third place debut of $18.8 million and recorded a horrendous 52% drop in week 2, pulling in just $8.9 million and dropping to 5th place. Its third week saw another 52% drop to 8th place as comedies The Proposal and the equal dismal caveman comedy Year One premiered. Land of the Lost would eventually make $69 million at the worldwide box office and was savaged by critics, currently sitting at 26% on Rotten Tomatoes. It didn't take long for the parties involved to start distancing themselves from the movie, as Universal president Ron Meyer would say at the Savannah Film Festival in 2011 that, quote, Land of the Lost was just crap. There was no excuse for it. The best intentions all went wrong. At a 2017 Comic-Con, Sid and Marty Krofft, who had developed and had a hand in creating the original show, said that it was, quote, one of the worst films ever made, and elaborated that they had no input and rarely visited the set. Only Danny McBride and surprisingly Roger Ebert were brave enough to defend it, with McBride saying in 2012, I think the show is awesome, and I think screenwriters Chris Henchy and Dennis McNicholas keep the mythology intact without taking it too seriously. If it was taken too seriously, it's just Jurassic Park. We've seen that movie before.
Land finds a lost.
Ebert would give it 3 out of 4 stars, saying, I guess you have to be in the mood for a goofball picture like this. I guess I was, which feels like pretty faint praise. Nowadays, it is a mostly forgotten reminder of studio waste, and that's it.
I figured out why they call this movie Land of the Lost, because the jokes didn't land and the money was lost.
Boom! Got him. Yeah, not for nothing. I am not a person that is typically like up in arms or clutching my pearls at studio waste. Movies cost money. We like movies. We would be hypocrites if we started saying it was stupid to spend money on this. But we're talking like the height of the housing crisis. And then you put the fucking lines in the movie for Matt Lauer to say about how spending $50 million on time warps is irresponsible and wasteful and, you know,
that's right.
Dire economic straits. So I'm like, you fucking said it, man. Now I'm thinking about that. I might not have made that connection if they didn't put that line in the movie, but I'm like, you really did spend $100 million on this piece of shit in the middle of one of the worst economic periods in American history.
Do you think that was a little bit of self-awareness?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
It's possible. I have nothing to back up that I don't think it was. I'm just going on the rest of the tone of this movie.
Yeah, none of it's that deep or making commentary on society, really.
Yeah.
It's making commentary on pooping in the well.
Literally. And that's what this movie did to my heart. Pooped in it like a well. You want to start going through the synopsis?
Yeah, let's jump right in. Rick Marshall, played by Will Ferrell, is a scientist who is publicly humiliated for his implausible tachyon-based time warp theory after a clip from his freakout on the Today Show went viral. Now he's been approached by another former scholar, Holly Cantrell, played by Anna Friel, who still believes in Marshall's theories. Holly convinces Rick to go test out his invention, the tachyon amplifier, at Devil's Canyon Mystery Cave, a rundown tourist trap that she believes has high tachyon activity. They're led into the cave by the gift shop operator, a sleazy huckster named Will, played by Danny McBride. Together on a raft inside the cave, the trio are carried away when Marshall activates the machine and the tiny creek becomes a raging waterfall and a portal to another dimension. Our heroes come to in a strange land, littered with artifacts from different historical eras. Then they rescue and befriend a local inhabitant, a precocious little ape-like creature named Chaka, played by Jorma Taccone. Together, they're forced to flee a T-Rex, who Holly nicknames Grumpy, after Marshall angers the beast by insulting the size of its brain. They all take shelter in a cave and settle down for their first night in the land of the lost.
Is maybe the T-Rex the straight man of this movie?
You know what? He kind of is, right?
He's kind of the foil for their ridiculousness.
He doesn't like to be joked about. He's literally grumpy. He is kind of a Stan Laurel. Wait, no, which one is he's kind of an Oliver Hardy?
You're going
I don't know.
way before my time.
No, he's kind of a Bud Abbott. Am I catching up in history?
No, still lost me, but I trust you, so I will agree with you blindly. He's more of an Egon. No, I can only think in terms of Ghostbusters. That's my only cultural touch point. So let's get right into it. This movie begins kind of uncomfortably in light of what we've learned in the past 10 years with Matt Lauer. And you brought up a good point off mic. Will Ferrell's character, Dr. Rick Marshall, is so repellent and just a giant asshole that like Matt Lauer drops his respectable newsman persona to basically ridicule him.
Right.
But Matt Lauer is no longer respected or dignified, so it kind of falls flat.
It kind of killed the joke of that whole bit that frames the whole movie or wraps around at the end. The movie's really about Dr. Rick Marshall being humiliated by Matt Lauer and then giving him his comeuppance. But Matt Lauer, thankfully, eventually got a bigger comeuppance in the real world, and so his status as the high-status character in the scene is undermined.
Rick Marshall and Tom Cruise were the only two that led us on to the fact that Matt Lauer sucks way before all the stories came out.
He's not such an artist that we have to spend a lot of time trying to separate his art. The first scene, I think it probably worked in its day, but it's a weird thing to hang the movie on.
The Ferrell Lauer scenes comedically do work for me because they're a little more grounded, I think, which is hilarious to say about like those scenes, but that's about as grounded as this movie gets.
Lauer is playing a straight man in these scenes, so we actually have scenes where somebody's playing it straight.
And Ferrell's character is ridiculous, and it's almost frustrating that nobody calls him ridiculous for the rest of the movie when Lauer's not around. He's almost the adult in the room, but he's not. He's just as childish as the McBride character.
Yeah, it's weird when that piles up because the next time we meet Rick Marshall is years later. He's been humiliated. Not that it's humiliating to teach kids science, but that's what he's doing at the Page Museum at the La Brea Tar Pits. And then he just, like, we knew he had these quirks of this ridiculous overconfidence from the first scene, but then we meet him again and it's just Bit City. He is just throwing out quirks one after another. And you quickly realize, like, whoa, he's out of control. What are they doing here?
Yeah, so let's list him off. He's clearly got a disordered eating situation going on. He's eating a donut stuffed with M&Ms, and he helpfully tells Holly, so that way when you're done with the donut, you don't have to eat any M&Ms.
Right.
Which I guess is a joke. And then he goes on a fast food binge, which you have to think all those companies paid for that, right?
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Isn't that kind of a strange sort of product placement that like your food is so caloric it put him into a fucking coma?
He does run down quite a list of fast food places that he went to on his binge, which doesn't make sense. The character has no other connection to food otherwise through the rest of the movie, does he?
Not really. We don't see him eat much. No. He does have a weird monologue about eating Chaka, which we have issues with, but we'll get to that.
Oh, that's true. They try to reference it, but it's it never feels real.
But then also there's the show tunes.
Yeah.
And like they throw all this stuff at us in one scene. It's when Holly wakes him up on the floor of his lab. He's got the mess of food and then the show tunes, which she helpfully refers to as a bit gay. And he says, it is great, isn't it? Which, yeah, that's a joke, I suppose.
Yeah, it's more of like an uncomfortable deflection. Like he's deflecting her homophobic remark and trying not to confront her about it.
But again, you almost got to, in the words of Drill, you absolutely don't have to hand it to Isel, but you almost have to hand it to this movie for giving her a line like that. She's like the competent scientist of the group, and they don't necessarily just make her into a boring cardboard cutout of a neurotic scientist the way another movie might.
No, she's silly for believing in him in the first place because he's ridiculous. They play her up that way, but because she's cracking weird jokes in the scene, it shows you that she's not playing the straight man. And then they finish the scene with him. Is this like a Will Ferrell thing? Like, why does he make weird exclamations?
It's a Ron he starts making a Ron Burgundy thing. Like that was a Burgundy thing. I think.
That's what it is.
Like Great Odin's Raven and all those things he would say.
Right.
By the beard of Zeus.
That's not from this movie. In this movie, he freaks out and goes, Captain Kirk's nipples.
That felt like a line he wanted to use in Anchorman and he just couldn't. So he was like, I'm going to hold on to that one.
And then later they do one other one. He's like, Great Gregor Mendel or something. But like, why are you shoving Ron Burgundy quirks onto this character? He has enough quirks.
And 10 years from now, you are not going to remember that this character in this movie said things like that. But they did it enough in Anchorman where it's like a memorable quirk of the character and it kind of makes sense with his buffoonery.
It was part of that character.
Here it's just tacked on.
Totally tacked on.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. That's a good call out. And then, but Anna Friel as Holly, she unfortunately spends a lot of the first act of the movie just having people grab her boobs. It's unfortunate.
It's a little uncomfortable. That's why your mind goes back to a different time, whether that's,
just locker room talk.
Horny Mel Brooks movies or 80s summer camp movies, like when the joke would just be like that the horny character is grabbing the boob of the one woman. As an actor, she deals with it. She retains that character's necessary dignity to get us through the film, but it's not all that comfortable to me.
No, it didn't feel great. Mel Brooks is an interesting shout, though. I didn't really consider him when thinking about this movie, but it feels more in line with like a bad Mel Brooks movie than it does with like a good Will Ferrell one.
Okay.
It has more in common, I think, with a bad Mel Brooks movie than it does with like Will Ferrell, who's maybe not a big part of the Apatow-verse, but he's definitely part of it. And McBride, of course, is certainly part of that. So that's where your brain goes. But yeah, it's like crass and lazy in the way bad Mel Brooks movies can be.
Yeah.
I'm a big Mel Brooks fan.
Me too.
But he does have bad movies in his catalog.
Yeah, he was capable of taking that same type of humor and doing it at a more elevated level when he was really on, but he didn't always hit those highs.
I can't wait to make you watch Spaceballs. So
I know,
excited.
it's coming up, and it's not that.
It's coming up real soon, I think, like a month or two. But yeah, when you brought up Mel Brooks, it fired a synapse in my brain. I was like, oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, he got as horny as anybody.
A little bit of trivia here. When they're driving out to Devil's Canyon, do you know who else drove out to Devil's Canyon?
I don't know, but I started wondering about what might be in the box for some reason.
Yeah, Detectives Mills and Somerset drove out to Devil's Canyon with Kevin Spacey in the back and then a FedEx driver, which how do you even get a FedEx driver to deliver there?
I don't know.
There's no address. Yeah, it's the isolated desert road from Seven.
It is. And they shot it with a rotating helicopter shot. So I feel like it was definitely evoking Seven for no reason.
Those towns I mentioned, Trona, California, and what was Toronto? Or
I
what
forgot
was
what the other one was. Oh, Dumont Dunes, which I don't know.
Dumont Dunes, yeah.
And I looked up Trona. I think they said that's like Death Valley or Death Valley adjacent.
And Lancaster was the other one.
Lancaster is closer to LA than those places, but it also has I wonder if that's where that road is. It's also
could be
a little bit out there towards the high desert. But yeah, it felt like they were definitely evoking it because you could go on that road, which is just a lot of scrubby flat land with these really tall electric towers. But then when you fly a helicopter over it and kind of circle over the road, it seems like you're doing a callback.
Yeah, they definitely drew enough attention to it. Like, I haven't seen Seven in 10 years, probably, and you probably haven't either. And we're just like, oh yeah, that looks like the road from Seven, which is a weird reference for this movie to me.
It has nothing to do, it doesn't take you anywhere.
There's no thematic tie to that. It's just a, look at that.
Because then you get to Devil's Canyon and it's totally silly. It's not ominous. It's not scary. It's just a washed up a little clown ride place.
Yeah, Danny McBride's the gift shop owner and he's playing the standard Danny McBride type character.
He's not playing any character as far as I could tell from the first scene. Like the moment he comes on screen, he's doing a bit. you want to buy some fireworks? And this is the whatever. He makes some offensive joke about his nickname for the fireworks. And he's like, you want to buy that? But we don't know the first thing about this character.
He's got his casino he wants to build, which begs the question, does he own this land? Like, how did he come to be in ownership of a plot of land of that size with his way of being?
That's the thing. If you wanted to make this character make some sense, you would give us like one little biographical detail or two, like, oh, I inherited
it, like, and he didn't want it.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, so he's wanting it just because he has to. It would have made a lot more sense.
If you go to a rundown, washed up place like that, you expect that the people running it, they look to you like dead enders who would just be sweaty and tired and not give a shit. So why does this guy have so much energy when you walk into his shop? I guess it's because he has the dream about the casino he's going to build. So that's why he's eager to sell some like booby mugs, but it just doesn't click.
His casino where he's hoping to sexually enslave women. That's a big callback of his in this movie. He really wants to sexually enslave some people.
Yeah.
And then he got to, and this is the end. It was just unfortunately for Channing Tatum, that's who got sexually enslaved.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
And they got Channing Tatum to do it, which is impressive in and of itself.
They closed the loop on that. But yeah, this is a character that's all about doing his bits. And McBride is pretty funny, and he manages to be funny a couple times in the movie, but it's not his best work.
No, I think this was relatively early on in his kind. Not that he was new to acting, but he was new to being in these kind of big budget things. And it's the same reason I don't like the Foot Fist Way very much, which I know was his breakout. He's definitely good at being the kind of like blue collar asshole, but he's figured out how to add layers to that in the years since that I don't think he necessarily had a handle on at this point.
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe they wrote and shot all kinds of stuff that made this character work, and it just didn't get in the movie.
That's a very charitable read.
His little 3 bits that he does in the first minute you meet him feels so disjointed and like, why did we do that? And then he puts on a weird hat and then he takes him on the tour and he's doing another sort of like medieval.
Oh, shit. He was already in Pineapple Express. Never mind. Yeah, no, he's a big enough star by this point.
He should have known what he was doing. I don't know. Yeah, maybe he didn't exercise enough control over the script. And like he's...
Yeah, you got to advocate for yourself a little bit.
He's a legit writer and creator, so...
He was in Tropic Thunder already. Yeah, no, he'd been around the block on big budget Hollywood. I want to correct my previous comment. I'm trying to cut Danny some slack.
Trying to find an excuse for him. Yeah, he was just on autopilot in this, and it's not bad. I mean, he's such a likable face on screen that I still liked him in parts of this movie, even though every joke we've mentioned sounds highly problematic. It somehow comes across a little bit better than that.
He has my favorite line there's 2 things that made me laugh out loud in this movie. And one is just where Will Ferrell, for some reason, mouths "fuck you" at Chaka, like right after he meets him. He whispers it at him. So I don't know if it counted as an F-bomb for the MPAA.
Right. He doesn't say it out
loud. It's kind of a gray area.
That was funny.
But then they come upon this great crystal structure early on in Act 2 that looks like a stage. And he says, maybe this is where our ancient ancestors held the Latin Grammys, which cracked me up.
That was a good kind of out of left field, semi-self-aware line. That was just one of the good jokes that they wrote. But yes, I like that too.
I got the feeling like he improv that line because you can almost see him crack when he says it.
Yeah.
And they cut away like real fast from his face. I think like he barely got it out before laughing himself.
Yeah.
And that's also where they do the share thing, which was another like kind of silly but welcome bit because it wasn't at anyone's expense necessarily.
That's true. Yeah. There are parts where they make it work. They do a funny joke that's out of left field, but it works because it's funny on its own merits. It's just that not enough of them are funny on their own merits.
Right.
But speaking of problematic jokesters, let's get to Chaka.
Good old Chaka. Yorm, you deserve better.
I didn't recognize him. I didn't know he was in the cast. And so I'm like, who the fuck is playing Chaka? I had to look it up. And then I was like,
you need a very small man, a small, funny man. I guess you don't have that many options. You go to Yorm.
Yeah.
He was already a favorite of mine when this movie dropped because he'd already done Hot Rod, which I was a big fan of. He'd popped up. I mean, I knew him from The Lonely Island, of course. He'd been on SNL already. Although he was never a cast member, I think. He was just a member of The Lonely Island. So he wrote their digital shorts. And I think he was a writer on some other stuff, but never part of the main cast. But you did know his face from the music videos and such with The Lonely Island.
Sure.
So yeah, I was excited for him because this isn't necessarily a Lonely Island movie. So I feel like when either like Akiva or Jorma was branching out at that point in their careers, it was like exciting because you're like, oh, maybe these guys are going to find their footing. And they have, but it just took a little longer. And
I have more love for him in this movie and Chaka in general after my second watch. As you referred to, the first time he came on screen, I'm like, I can't look at this guy. He's just hard to look at his face.
Yeah, he's got these big buck teeth and Like he's kind of a monkey and kind of a guy.
Prosthetic forehead, eyebrows, and then just like this. It's authentic to the original that the monkey suit just looks really basic and dumb. It's just like furry pajamas. Like it doesn't have any features. It doesn't look like anything real. And he plays into it. You got to give him credit. As a comic actor, he knows how stupid his face looks and he's making the most of it every time he's on screen. But it's just tough to watch.
It's also it's a very physically demanding role too, because he's not walking around. He's in a crouch always, like hopping.
I thought about that too.
Like it's got to be exhausting.
His quads must have been burning like hell.
So it's an impressive performance when you break it down, but it's just not a character whose comedy I necessarily connected with, because so much of his character is focused on like the gross out bits.
The gross out stuff. He's grabbing boob, and then
we find out why he's been exiled from his
community. For some reason, Holly can speak his language, and he's telling her.
They hand wave that bit real fast too.
Hand wave that, which is silly, but I like that part of the comedic silliness of the reality, that she can somehow speak his language because she spent a year at the primate exhibit at the Manchester Zoo or something.
She's a regular Jane Goodall.
She translates that he's been treated too harshly for the simple crime of, and he goes, jussa, jussa, and he makes kind of a two-handed jack-off motion. And then in what I think is ADR, she says, the crime of pooping in the village well.
Oh, you think maybe he did a different crime and they had to
I think he did a different crime in the village well, or a different crime in general. And they're like, nah, that line's not going to work. That's going to give you the R rating.
I see. That's some good detective work there. Usually I'm the ADR police.
You are the ADR police, and this time I caught it.
Yeah.
Citizen Patrol caught the ADR. And I'm pretty sure that was not what juica juica means.
Yeah, that's a good point. And his whole gesture, you're right. It does not invoke poop.
Pooping in a well, it doesn't look anything like that.
So much as the forbidden liquid that they couldn't talk about in this, the one liquid they couldn't talk about in this movie. Speaking of ADR police, I just have to say, strap the fuck in for our Madam Web episode, which will probably come in January. Okay. Because that movie has the absolute worst ADR crimes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Or heard, because you don't see anyone's mouth move. It's got some real groaners. The movie sucks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's not fun in like a bad way like The Beekeeper was to me. It's just bad.
I watched part of it and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I had to turn it off.
But we're going to do it. We did Morbius. We got to cover all the Sony Dark Universe, whatever weirdos.
Yeah.
Not the Venoms, because they make money.
It's true. You know. We can't catch Venom.
And you did bring up some interesting Blast Zone parallels.
You know what? I think it might be those supplements I talked about. My memory seems to be working better because
I know you're pulling stuff out of nowhere.
I've been remembering things about the show that I'm like, that's not like me. So I came up with a couple of Blast Zone parallels for our faithful fans. This is the second time we've had a movie that opens at the La Brea Tar Pits. Do you know what the other one was?
Last Action Hero, right?
Oh, did Last Action Hero do that? I was thinking of Miracle Mile.
Oh, shit, you're right. I don't know if Last Action Hero started there, but it's definitely like a big part of the movie.
Oh, yeah, it's got an action. Okay, so yeah, we both teamwork here. We filled in two different Blast Zone episodes.
Last Action Hero, I'm going back like 3 years.
Yeah, the Tar Pits get a lot of screen time in the movies because it's a fun LA landmark to splash around in. But
now you're going to have to help me out with the next one because I could not pull it.
Okay, my next one is movies that feature a powerful crystal worn by the female lead as a necklace that can be used to activate a portal home from a parallel dimension. That sound familiar to any fans? The other movie that did that is...
Oh, Super Mario.
Super Mario.
Yes.
Isn't that weird?
Thank you.
Both heroines literally wear a crystal on their neck and they use it to get home from another dimension.
That's rad. Good pulls, Ian. You're on your fucking on your game.
Thank you. I gotta keep taking my mushroom powder pills.
If you want to know how bad my memory is, I sent Ian a article about Horizon, the Kevin Costner Western that bombed. The second one was supposed to come out in August and they pulled it from the calendar. And I said, I guess we're going to have to do our first Costner movie. He was like, we actually did two of them back to back. We did Waterworld as our 50th episode. Like it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then we did Draft Day.
Yeah.
Don't smoke weed, kids. It's not worth it.
I got to hook you up with a bottle of my pills here.
Yeah, your tinctures, your potions.
It's good stuff.
Is there anything else from this first chapter we need to discuss?
No, I think we juice it all over this section. We can move on to Act 2.
All right. The next morning, Marshall receives a telepathic cry for help, and the group follows him to check out some ancient ruins. At the site, they're attacked by slow-moving reptile men called the Sleestack, and are forced to flee into a giant crystal where they meet a creature named Enoch the Altrusian, played by John Boylan. He's the one who called out to Marshall for help. Enoch explains that he's been imprisoned there by an evil being called the Zarn, played by Leonard Nimoy. Holy shit, played by Leonard Nimoy? Sorry. I can hear it now that you say it, but did not catch it, and he needs the help of the tachyon amplifier to escape. They go looking for the device and almost get it back when they defeat a huge Allosaurus, but the machine is snapped up by a flying pteranodon, takes it up to her volcano nest. So the gang must venture up into the nest and pull off a tense recovery that involves singing show tunes to placate the hatchling dinosaurs. Having retrieved the tachyon amplifier, the group celebrates. Chaka gets Marshall and Will to drink from a fruit that sends the three of them on a psychedelic trip, and they vibe out together and do some gay stuff too. Meanwhile, Holly restores the machine and follows its signal into a cave. There, she learns a shocking truth. The Zarn was a good guy, and he was killed by their new friend Enoch, who in truth is an evil mastermind. Enoch plans to mind control the Sleestack and use the tachyon device to conquer Earth. But it's too late to warn the others, as Holly is captured by the Sleestack and put on trial for helping Enoch. This is like needlessly convoluted here with the whole Enoch fake out.
I think they call him Enoch, but I didn't want to correct you in the midst of that because it absolutely doesn't matter one iota. But
Enoch sounds a little too much like eunuch. But
yeah,
it's
Enoch and the Zarn. I think those are actually...
Enoch and the Zarn is a fucking prog metal band, if I've ever heard one.
I think those names came directly from the original TV show. When I Googled those names, I got to a wiki from the original. So I think they did lift those characters.
That makes sense. And I wouldn't be surprised if John Boylan actually did the voice in the first one. Because, like, you ever hear somebody's voice, you're like, that dude's old as shit.
Yeah.
Like, when I heard that guy's voice, like, that's an old man.
That's an old guy, but he has a great voice for Enoch. Like,
yeah.
I was like, I want to hear this character talk just because he sounds cool. Like, he's not even hardly doing bits like everyone else. He just sounds neat when he talks.
I was like, that's an ancient voice, probably coming from an ancient man. Well, you see, John Boylan's probably like 42 years old.
No, I think you're right that he's a little older. His one bit is that he says crystals when he's talking about crystals, and he keeps elongating that word just to be silly.
Maybe he was a champagne enthusiast.
That could be it.
Loves some crystal.
He wants to pop the crystal.
Well, it says here he died in 1994, so that can't be right. He's a Canadian actor.
I think he's the Canadian one. I found that when I Googled too. He's actually hard to find.
There he is. Yeah. He's been acting since the 70s, so yeah, he's got to be up there by now.
At this point.
Who was he in the newsroom? Doesn't say. He must not have been a big part.
Because he's only voiceover, like you can't connect him to anything.
Oh, I bet he was like the announcer on the newsroom, like the guy who's like, and now, nightly news. Like,
that could be.
That would make sense for his voice. I unfortunately was a newsroom fan. It's not a popular thing to be. It's very much like lib masturbation material. But
yeah, it gets called out for being that now.
It's Sorkin-esque. That's all you got to say, and everyone should know what you mean. The man's got a view of American politics that is not tethered to reality at all, but damn good screenwriter.
I'm not sure if anyone really wants to see American reality on TV these days.
That's true.
We might favor some escapism here or there.
Fucking A. You said it, brother.
We might be willing to even pour hadrosaur urine on our heads to escape from that reality.
So this act, does it have the mosquito attack too? Yeah, it is in this. So a lot of the gross out stuff is focused in this second act. A lot of the grossest jokes, which include
fun and games section.
Will Ferrell not only pouring hadrosaur urine on himself, but drinking some to, quote, get it into the bloodstream, which that's not sound science.
He's so doing a bit. I like that he has this giant jug of dinosaur urine. I like that he has to pour it on his head and it's gross. Like, it could be a good joke, but it's not tethered to a necessity for the characters in this movie. And you can see it on the faces of the other two characters who are watching him do it. Like, they don't have it in themselves to be the straight man. So they're not that grossed out. They're not that indignant at the idea that they're being asked to do what he's doing. They just watch it. They're like, oh, it's time for your bit. We're not doing our bits right now. We're watching your bit. And he just does his bit. And then it flames out because they go, oh, never mind. Just follow Chaka instead.
But it does actually, I'll give the movie a little bit of credit for tying the hadrosaur urine, I can't believe I'm saying these words, back a little later on when the T-Rex is attracted to him even more so because he smells like prey.
Yeah, it's not a script where things don't connect. Like, all the weird things eventually pay off. The show tunes pays off. The hadrosaur urine attracts the Allosaurus to him, which then he has to kill, which is how they find the device. Like, everything has a little connection eventually, but not the most fun payoffs.
Yeah, it's like they take the most boring route to their destination, but they do get there.
And then this is where the big action set pieces are. When they go out to try to find the tachyon amplifier and two giant dinosaurs attack at the same time and they're running around through the desert. There was some fun to that. I liked the directorial style where it becomes these handheld cameras that are following the actors that are like zooming in and out wildly. I felt like there was some sort of fun, manic action energy there.
Yeah, it doesn't. I can't really think of another movie movie with that kind of camera work and the action set pieces. It does give a uniqueness to this movie.
I felt like that's where they were striking a good tone, combining the sci-fi stuff, the special effects. And of course, when your camera is super shaky and zooming in and out, that eases the burden on your special effects crew because then you stay in focus in frame as long.
You don't need the same amount of clarity. But that begs the questions. Maybe they were trying too hard to be raunchy. And if they just steered into this kind of action comedy, I'm not saying it would have been a successful movie, but it might have been a better movie if they just stuck with this tone.
It might have been. I see your point, but then I'm about to say when we get to the end of this section where they get the machine back, they celebrate by swimming in this motel pool and tripping balls. That was maybe my favorite part of the movie.
Eating big lobsters.
Eating giant crab that steams itself accidentally and trips over a geyser.
Reminded me of nothing more than the lobstrosities from the Dark Tower. If we have any followers of the Beam that listen, you saw the movie obviously, but you didn't read the books yet.
Is that where the giant lobsters come in?
Yeah, they don't pop up. They're called lobstrosities. They're just big lobsters.
Oh, okay.
They play a key role in the book.
I see. I was trying to connect. I'm like, I don't remember McConaughey deploying lobsters.
No, because the movie covered like the first book really, but then also a little extra because it was bad and stupid. But they skipped over the whole point where the lobstrosities would have impacted the story. But they do have quite a big impact on the story. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but go read the Dark Tower series. It's real good.
Interesting. That's a teaser right there. But yeah, this, talking about visual style, the motel pool scene is so stylish.
Yes, because it's got the retro kind of Americana vibe of the hotel and the car, like the abandoned cars.
The motel that's dropped in at an angle to this desert, and they're swimming and jumping off the diving board, and it's slow-mo. And there's just all these scenes where the colors and the framing and the actors are like blocked. They're making these really interesting compositions. I'm like, oh, the director
there's a lot of haze in the shots. Like
the director's doing interesting things in the scene, and then the actors, Jorma doesn't get to do. He's still doing Chaka acting, but the other two guys are playing they're doing their high tripped out thing, and they both do that really well. And so they're telling each other they love each other and all this stuff. I was like, whatever this is a good movie. It has very little to do with the rest of the movie, but I kind of enjoyed that.
And I don't know that you could make a good movie out of that segment because it might get grating on its own. But yeah, it is a nice little respite in the middle of this kind of haywire action we've got going on.
So yeah, when you come back to this movie as somebody who's watched it, we always talk about, would you turn it on if it was on cable or streaming? I would watch that scene. If that scene came on TV, I would sit down on the couch and catch it until the action picked back up and it got dumb.
That's high praise. You would spend your precious time watching the motel scene from Land of the Lost. But yeah, you talked me into it. I'm on board with that scene and that whole sequence. Okay. I was ambivalent about it before, but I'm picking up what you're putting down. And it's also nice to just see the characters be nice to each other for a little while.
That's true.
Because there's a lot of antagonism in the first half of this movie. Everyone's backstabbing each other in like small, kind of inconsequential ways, but it's just,
that's true.
There's like a nastiness in the air throughout all of it. And even though it's drug induced and a bit gay, to quote Holly.
Yeah.
Like they're being nice to each other, which it warmed my little heart.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think we got to give them credit for that because they definitely set it up by making all the characters ready to stab each other in the back the rest of the time. Will's ready to put Marshall down when he starts acting weird, says he has the jungle madness or whatever. And it's both silly and goofy and heartwarming. And then just like the effects, the giant crab legs when they're eating them, when they're taking bites out of it, somehow I just love that because it's like a really grotesque, but like beautifully sculpted giant plastic crab legs that they're taking bites out of.
Did you like go to the Chinese spot for some crab rangoon after that?
I gotta get down to the buffet.
The king crab legs. I don't know, but do you guys get those in Cali? Because they usually come from New England, don't they?
I think we get the Alaskan ones.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Those are supposed to be the best one.
Are they? Yeah. Honestly, I don't usually go for the crab legs. If I'm at the Bellagio buffet or something, I'll leave the crab legs for somebody else.
I like them, but my wife's a saint and she makes what we call, we didn't make this up, it's a real term, but lazy man lobster, where she breaks all the lobster down before we eat. So you don't have to be sitting there with the crackers and trying to fish them.
That is saintly. Yeah. I would eat that.
She's much better. Like I've injured myself trying to eat lobster many times. There's one like I tried to like snap a claw with my hand and I got a little sharp one of those little like spurs
cuts through
right in like the palm of my hand. Yeah. It was rough. I was bleeding for an hour.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't hungry anymore and I missed out on my lobster.
I can leave those crustaceans alone.
What were we talking about?
Do you want to talk about other creatures in this section? They have to go into the nest of the pterodon or pterosaur. I don't know. I don't have children.
Pteranodon. Yeah.
Pteranodon. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not pterodactyl anymore. That's an outdated.
I think I sensed that. And that's why I didn't use that word, which I would have otherwise defaulted to.
I think pterosaur is acceptable. I think they're both acceptable, but definitely not pterodactyl. Also, who fucking cares? Call them whatever you want.
This movie doesn't give a shit about realistic. Every egg in this nest is like a different size and shape for some reason. The whole thing is just there to pay off the All That Jazz show tune that plays on Marshall's machine from the beginning. And it turns out that the hatchlings love that song, and so they all have to sing it. But
It's the I Gotta Get This Job song
yeah, I didn't even know
from
that.
All That Jazz. I definitely heard it, but I couldn't have told you where it was from.
I'm sorry, that might be a chorus line. I'm switching my musicals up.
Yeah, I'm not a big musical guy. But,
I know between the two of us, we are not going to solve this with our innate knowledge of Broadway.
But I definitely recognize the song from something. I recognized it from something is all you're getting out of me. It's the best I could do here.
And then Will Ferrell transforms his costume till he looks like a character from that show with the headband and the shirt tied up and the leg warmers, and he has to do a dance. And I chuckled, I have to admit.
And then, of course, we find out that Chaka has the voice of an angel.
That's right.
And that angel is Jorma Taccone.
Yeah.
That was just his regular voice. He got to use his human voice for a change.
A lovely deep singing voice.
Which was it was a nice little reveal. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good bit.
I don't know. Are you actually talking me out of hating this movie so much during the, has this ever happened before? Have you ever changed my mind about a movie mid-episode?
I'm talking myself out of it too. I noticed that. And it's my classic second watch warm up where I get more friendly towards a movie. I definitely had that today as I was watching it a second time. I'm like, I can actually learn to love some of these things. So I get it. When you quoted Danny McBride as like, hey guys, this was actually fun and cool. I get why he would say that.
I do too. And it's interesting because we did run a poll on the Blast Zone Twitter asking people what they thought about this movie. Was it as bad as the critics said, or was it a little underrated? And it was split almost exactly down the middle.
Wow, I didn't see the final result. That's interesting now.
A few hundred voters, so it wasn't like a super small sample size.
No, that's pretty good.
It was like 52% said it was as bad as critics said, and 48% said it was underrated.
And thanks for voting, everybody who voted. I love to see all that engagement. And a really interesting result. Yeah, I didn't vote because at the time you posted that, I hadn't seen it. So I'm like, I got to be honest, I don't have an opinion yet while this poll is open.
I voted, but I had seen it, but I also didn't remember it. So I kind of lied. I kind of cheated.
But you got to see the polls sometimes to let people know.
That's why some people put a results button, but I don't like to do that because I think it skews the results.
Yeah, it makes it too easy for people to not take a stand.
And it's anonymous, just be honest.
Yeah.
You want to move on to Act 3?
Let's bring it on home. Marshall and Will track down Holly and free her from the Sleestaks, who imprisoned her. But Enoch shows up with a mind-controlled Sleestak army of his own, and he reveals his plans to open a portal and invade Earth. Then he leaves Marshall to face off against his nemesis, Grumpy the T-Rex. Marshall pole vaults directly into the creature's mouth, which seems like a failure, but in the next scene, he returns. It turns out he passed through Grumpy's bowels, clearing the dinosaur's constipation and thereby earning his friendship. With help from the T-Rex, Marshall, Will, Holly, and Chaka defeat Enoch and his army of Sleestaks. Then Marshall uses the tachyon crystal that Holly found to hold open the portal back to Earth just long enough for them to escape. But Will elects to stay behind with his new friend Chaka. Will is later rewarded for this when he meets the beautiful women of Chaka's tribe. And Marshall and Holly are pretty happy too. With his theory proven true, Marshall goes back on the Today Show and tells Matt Lauer to suck it.
He even called his book, Matt Lauer Can Suck It. Or Suck It, Matt Lauer.
One of those, yeah.
I did like that he threw in the line, I can't believe your lawyer has okayed that. Kind of calling out the absurdity of it a little bit, while also reveling in it to some extent. And I like any scene where Matt Lauer is made to look like a fool.
Yeah, gets a little comeuppance. But you made a point earlier that the plot gets complicated, and it was almost too complicated to explain here because the heroes sided with Enoch early on because he told them that he was the one who was unfairly imprisoned. And then they find out here that it wasn't. But the entity or entities that make that a problem for our heroes are these dead skulls, which are apparently in the original lore called the Library of Skulls, but it's never mentioned in the movie.
Sure. Yeah, my eyes just glazed over as soon as I saw that show. And here's the thing. I don't think the Enoch and Zarn switcheroo is too complicated necessarily, but there's so much other stuff going on with the dinosaurs and the tachyon amplifier, the pteranodons and the T-Rex and the Allosaurus. Like, none of them are on anyone's side. They're just behaving like wild animals. So they're just this whole other variable you've dropped into the story that now you have to account for, plus all this other shit going on. It's almost like, pick your poison. Is it nature or is it these advanced civilizations that are engaging in trickery?
I think you're right. It's like a Marvel movie level thing where you befriend a guy who tells you that he's been unfairly imprisoned, and it turns out he's the evil mastermind in the end. And this movie just didn't really need an evil mastermind.
Yeah, it didn't. Just trying to get home with proof of what was there probably would have been enough. But maybe that's not true to the show. I never saw the original show.
Or if they did have an evil mastermind, he just could have been evil the whole time.
Right.
They could have thought for a second that he was friendly. But to have this thing where there's like politics and there's like the laws involved, Holly's on trial from these skulls, that who's talking through the skulls? Because it's not the Sleestak, because they're like dumb automatons.
But then the Sleestak bring up, I had another another issue with the kind of the Slee stack and the way they're dispatched, because it's like their point of view makes a lot of sense. You freed this genocidal maniac. He's going to wipe us all out, mind control us, make us wipe you out. So they kind of have a point putting her on trial, but then they just murder them.
Yes,
they kick him into a fiery chasm.
Yeah, Will Ferrell kills all of them. I was actually kind of like, is he really doing this? And then they just kept going. They threw them all into the fire pit and burned them all into cinders for the crime of arresting her for an actual crime.
For committing a legitimate crime against humanity.
Or Sleestanity.
But eventually humanity, if he gets his way, he's going to go destroy the earth. But I also felt that way when they killed the Allosaurus.
That's true.
It's like you had to kill him. He's an animal. He's just doing what animals do. He's not evil. You could argue the T-Rex has some level of intelligence and autonomy over his behavior with the way he kind of stalks Marshall and threatens him with a walnut. But like the Allosaurus is just a big dumb animal as far as we could tell. And they just murder him because like he was in their way.
Well, it was a she. It was Alice, the Allosaurus.
Oh, she. Thank you.
But yes, your point is well taken. She was strictly out there looking for, and I guess, do they make her evil for feeding on the human that showed up in the drop zone? But that would make them. Man? Ice Cream Man falls into the land of the lost while they're there watching it happen. And you know what? Our heroes don't have a lot of sympathy. They just see the only other human in this whole land just showed up in front of them. And they're like, ooh, that sucks. Like they don't try to help him.
I guess it begs the question of, do you consider like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park evil for eating people? You could say maybe the raptors, they seem to have a bit of a mean streak to them, but like T-Rex is just, they're just big dumb animals. In Jurassic Park, I wouldn't say the T-Rex is dumb in this movie. He's actually quite intelligent.
He's actually super smart. We don't know how smart Alice is, but she got defeated by Rick Marshall.
By a catapult.
Yeah, catapult a nitrogen canister down her gullet and it blew her up into little chunks.
Not even a trebuchet, not even the superior siege weapon, just a stupid old catapult.
Plain vanilla. Speaking of things going down dinosaurs' throats, Rick Marshall does it himself in the climactic Grumpy battle, or you could say the anticlimactic Grumpy battle. What did you make of that whole sequence?
It serves the purpose of getting Grumpy and Rick on the same page and on the same team. But boy, does this movie love its fucking poop jokes and pee jokes. And I was ready to be done with those well before this point. Like, there had to be a better way.
The problem for me was like, let me just state for the record that I'm on board with the idea that the T-Rex nemesis was angry the whole time because he was constipated, because I get it. That's relatable to me. And Rick clears his constipation and then they become friends. I'm like, okay, that's a perfectly good plot point. But then they milk the joke way past the point. It's not actually funny. He won't tell them how he got out of his belly.
Right.
And then he tells them and then they go, he pooped you out. And they keep saying it like they're trying to find something funny about it or milk it, but it's like, well, clearly that happened.
There's two ways to get out of there. Yeah, it's inherently not that funny. I did really like the shot of him pole vaulting directly into the T-Rex's mouth. And I saw, like, once he started flying in slow motion, you could just tell by his trajectory it wasn't going to go well, but I was like, it was still funny when he just and then the film speeds up as soon as he gets right into it. It was good. It was well shot. It was well done.
That's a classic move, a comedic reversal of expectations with the big power move goes absolutely wrong. That's not a bad gag.
Yeah.
They just milked it at the end for no reason when it was like, they just kept wanting to make sure the audience knew it was poop and there's poop and he's covered in poop.
But he's not covered in poop either.
He's not. His shirt was a little bit brown and dingy, but they didn't go really gross with that.
And for that, they have my gratitude.
That
might have been a bridge too far. But then I did like that they came to an understanding and now Grumpy is his buddy and he helps them escape. I thought that was a nice capper because look at it from this T-Rex's point of view. Like, Marshall was an asshole to him the entire movie.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, we have an inherently unlikable protagonist in this movie. And he's got very few moments. Like, at the end, he's still petty and childish and a buffoon, as evidenced by the closing scene with Lauer.
Yeah. You made that point to me from the beginning, and I didn't feel it as strongly as you felt it because you had rewatched this just before I finished my first watch. And so you're like, this movie kind of sucks because the Will Ferrell character, they didn't let him be likable. He's totally unlikable the whole time. I'm like, oh, that sucks because Will Ferrell's actually good at playing buffoons that are realistically terrible, but somehow still lovable. I'm like, that sucks.
Right.
They didn't
childlike, I think, kind-hearted, but also a complete fuck up.
Yeah. I'm like, they didn't let him be lovable. And in the end, I thought there was still a crack of lovability for him. So I guess I was more open to liking Rick Marshall than you were. But I do think you have a point that he kind of stinks.
Well, it's his arc, right? He's still telling Matt Lauer to suck it.
Yeah.
At the last scene of this movie. Like, he doesn't really go anywhere as a person.
Yeah, no, he's still a puffed up jerk and a buffoon. I guess because he earns Holly's love, you're supposed to warm up to him. But
Holly's also kind of a maniac in her own right.
She's a goof. And you already mentioned that we both just barely thought that that romance was believable or even tolerable to see them kissing on screen. So it doesn't quite work to warm you up to him.
No, and maybe it's not, I don't know. I gotta tread carefully here, but maybe it's not just age so much as, I guess it does work though, to play into your idea of like, she doesn't have her shit together either. Cause like she's intelligent and attractive and he's neither.
You didn't think he earned it.
Not that Will Ferrell's an ugly part. Like when she first meets him, he's covered in sandwiches. He's undignified and he's child. Like, you know, it's almost like there's an intellectual gap more than an age gap in the other direction that like makes it a little unbelievable.
No, I think you're right. She does feel too good for him from the get-go, in air quotes, too good for him. And I think that's part of the reason they make her character dumb and silly so that they connect more. And that's why he heroically kills all those undeserving slee stacks, risks his life to save her from the cage. And that's what locks in her love for him, that he risked it all for her.
But then she also says, I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you, which is like,
true.
Really? You did? When he was passed out, covered in Del Taco?
Yeah, we can't really go with her there, but that's the kind of goof that she is. They deserve each other.
You a Del Taco man?
I used to be. There's one in my neighborhood where I grew up, so I used to do a lot of those 79-cent chicken soft tacos. Those were good.
I've only ever had it in Vegas, but I thought it was solid.
I honestly don't know if it's solid anymore, but it was a favorite for a while.
And then we'd be remiss if we did not mention this movie's got a stinger.
Yeah.
It's got a post-credits stinger, and thankfully you told me about it, or I might have never seen it.
I dug it out. I was suspicious because I guess it's a Hollywood thing where if the first part of your credits look really colorful and elaborate, that's kind of a clue to stick around that maybe something else worth watching is going to happen if it doesn't just switch to black with a white crawl.
Right.
So that's how these are. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's something going on here. And coincidentally, for our listeners, this movie's on Netflix this month while we're taping, July of 2024. So that makes it easy to find it, to watch it, and also to scroll forward, which I did to check. Is there a credits stinger? Like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and all it is Rick Marshall brings Matt Lauer a dinosaur egg, and the egg starts to hatch in the studio after everyone's gone for the night. Nice try, guys, but no sequel for you.
No.
It's not in the cards. And that's Land of the Lost. I think I was pretty down on this movie when we started recording this episode. I was thinking like a D-. You might have talked me up to like a C+.
I feel like I had that journey. I was pretty down on the movie after the first watch, and somehow I did my usual warm-up, and I don't know, Will Ferrell, Anna Friel, Danny McBride, Jorma Taccone. It's hard to keep hating on them. They're all so lovable.
Yeah, some of my favorite comedic actors. And I admit I was not super familiar with Anna Friel
Me either.
before this, but I did find her winning. And
Yeah,
you know,
she was great casting.
it's just, I don't know that I'm going to go through her filmography now looking for stuff to watch, but if I'm stuck, like, should I watch this or not? And I see she's in it, it might tip the scales.
Yeah, I'm curious. She was the star of a BBC crime drama where she's the police investigator, I think.
Called Chuck or something like that.
I think that was her ABC show.
Hold on. I'm on IMDb.
Yeah, let's find her.
Anna Friel. Let's give her flowers. Although I do have a blurb about her at the end.
We can come back to her if you want to start at the top of the credits.
Hold on.
Oh, yeah, she's Chuck in Pushing Daisies, which is ABC.
Pushing
show.
Daisies was the big one. Yeah, was it Noah Hawley? Or, oh, no, sorry, Brian Fuller, not Noah Hawley.
Okay.
The other TV auteur that makes shows I like. Brian Fuller made Hannibal after this. That was his next show.
I see. I didn't know that.
Very good TV creator. So yeah, maybe I should check out Pushing Daisies. I've always heard good things about it. She's been on way more TV than she's been in movies.
That seems to be the case.
Perfectly valid way to make a living as an actor. No shade at all. But Marcella?
Yeah.
Is that who you're thinking of?
That's her BBC cop drama.
Oh, I like those detective shows.
Yeah, like that could be fun. I'm
Yeah.
definitely willing to check that one out too.
All right, so let's get into the people involved in creating this movie. We'll start with the writers. It was Chris Henchy and Dennis McNicholas, which were name dropped in the McBride quote from the monologue. Henchy was the co-creator of Funny or Die with, of course, Will Ferrell and I think Adam McKay as well.
Okay.
And he wrote for Spin City, Entourage, some Ferrell stuff like The Other Guys, The Campaign, which maybe we should do The Campaign in November. The Will Ferrell, Zach Galifianakis comedy that.
Oh yeah, never
that
saw
one.
that.
It's a little smarter than you might think at first glance. He's married to Brooke Shields too, so kudos for him.
Good for Henchy. I love the name.
Yeah, Chris Henchy. That sounds like
Henchy is just a good comedy name. Like you're going to succeed with that.
It could also be like a good. Maybe it's just because of the hench. I'm thinking like a henchman, but like a noir, like bone breaker type of guy.
If you were like a small henchman, like this is my henchman Henchy. Come over here, Henchy. And
Well, Henchy. McNicholas was a longtime SNL writer, primarily for Weekend Update.
oh, okay,
I think is a longtime SNL writer. I think he's still there, which
Really?
is crazy because
that is a long time.
He also wrote The Ladies Man,
Interesting.
which we might have to cover one day.
Yeah.
We do love us some Tim Meadows, and Will Ferrell's in that one too.
That's true. That sounds tempting.
Tiffany Amber Thiessen too. You want to talk about like your first crush? That was definitely like her on Saved by
Yeah.
the Bell was a big moment for me.
She's a lot of guys' boys' first crush and gals, probably.
Yeah, her and Amy Jo Johnson, the Pink Ranger from the Power Rangers, I think, for like my generation's like Farrah Fawcett's, you know.
Nice.
Directed by Brad Silberling. So he directed a lot of TV early in his career. He did stuff like Doogie Howser, Brooklyn Bridge, NYPD Blue. And then he did Casper, the 1995. Bill Pullman was the star of that one. That was a hit. He followed it up with City of Angels. And here's a little bit of trivia that I thought was just really funny. So Casper and City of Angels both cost $55 million. Casper made $198 million and City of Angels made $200 million. So it's like, this guy's if you want just slightly less than quadruple your return on investment, like you go see Silberling.
It's funny. Oh, yeah. He keeps making the same movie. Casper, City of Angels. It's formulaic shit.
Two movies that could not be more different. City of Angels, of course, gave us the seminal Goo Goo Dolls hit, Iris.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about it. I did see that back in the day.
Was that Nicolas Cage?
I think it's Cage. It's Cage and Meg Ryan, maybe?
That sounds right. He did Moonlight Mile in 2002, which was his first flop.
Oh.
It had a $21 million budget, only made $10 million.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was a little surprised to see he did Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. And I was even more surprised to find out that was kind of a flop. I thought that was a hit.
I thought so too. Had a big cultural footprint.
It did.
And maybe a big marketing footprint is maybe what it had that made us think it was a hit, because it was like on every bus bench.
Yeah, they made such a big deal about the makeup he was putting himself through for the shots.
Yeah.
But it had a $142 million budget and made $211 million.
Okay.
So definitely lost some money. Next, he did 10 Items or Less, which was kind of an experimental movie. It was shot in just 15 days. It's got Morgan Freeman in it, I'm pretty sure is the big name in it. And it was released as a digital download while it was still in theaters, which would become way more popular years later. But at that time, it was the first one to ever do that.
That's normal now, but in 2006, that's super weird.
Yeah, and then his last movie was 2017's Ben Kingsley thriller, An Ordinary Man, which is fucked up because there's a much better movie called An Ordinary Man, isn't there? Or there's A Serious Man. There's a Coen Brothers movie, wasn't it?
Wait, what's the Coen one?
I'm thinking of A Serious Man, I think.
Maybe.
A very good 2009 movie. Yeah, that's the Coen Brothers one. If you're a Michael Stuhlbarg fan, which how could you not be?
Oh, I saw that one. That was weird and interesting.
You were going to say bad, weren't you?
I don't remember it being bad, but I remember it being like a challenging watch for some reason.
Yeah, the Coens got a few of those.
Yeah.
They do have their easy breezy kind of crime thrillers and comedies, but even those they try to inject with
They
strangeness.
try to put you on edge. Yeah, they're not about making their audience comfortable. That's for sure.
But he's back to doing mostly TV. He did the Charmed reboot, the Dynasty reboot, Jane the Virgin. He's a working director, not a marquee name by any means. He's doing his thing.
Yeah, not a bad career.
So I feel like the Ferrell is going to be a rehash of Semi-Pro because he was just coming off Semi-Pro.
Oh, okay.
He made Semi-Pro, which of course flopped because we did an episode on it. And then Step Brothers, which was a huge hit and even more so than a financial hit. You mentioned cultural footprint when talking about Lemony Snicket, like Step Brothers has stood the test of time in that regard.
Yeah.
Almost more than any other Ferrell movie except Anchorman, I would say.
I did see it once, but I noticed because I didn't see it at the time and it gets quoted so much. And I'm like, the culture is leaving me behind. I need to see Step Brothers. And finally I did, but obviously I need to see it more because I don't have all those quotes at my fingertips.
Are you saying pow? Pow. Step Brothers is a good time. That's a good, the only time I've enjoyed Rob Riggle. Oh no, I liked him in 21 Jump Street also. He was entertaining in that. He's often a bit much for me though. I think that's a fair assessment of Rob Riggle. A bit much.
He's a lot. He's a big character as a character and as a man.
True. Did you know he was in the military? They won't stop telling.
I heard that somehow, yeah.
He followed this up with the dramedy Everything Must Go. I don't know if you remember that one. It was interesting. He was like selling all his stuff because his wife divorced him or something.
Oh, I can picture the poster, but that's all I know about it.
Yeah, it flopped, but it got good reviews. And that was when he had already done Stranger Than Fiction. So it was in his period of trying to like do some comedies, but also branch out into some other stuff too.
Uh-huh.
And then he did The Other Guys, which I was surprised to see wasn't a huge hit. Probably made a little bit of money, but it's probably my favorite Ferrell movie. And I think it's aged better than a lot of other ones.
I like that one a lot. I think I watched part of it not that long ago. I'd seen it once before probably and then came back to it. It's got some really good stuff. That's a movie that I feel like I'm glad now that I recognize some of the quotes when people wield the quotes from that movie because I'm like, oh yeah, I love that. That was The Other Guys.
I'm a peacock. Gotta let me fly. I do. What's up with him in show tunes though? Because that's how the Steve Coogan character keeps getting them to leave him alone is he keeps giving them tickets to Broadway musicals.
Oh.
They go to see Jersey Boys. They go like Wicked. It's like a running joke in the movie, but it has my favorite running joke in any Will Ferrell movie, which is Michael Keaton's police chief quoting TLC and pretending like he doesn't know he's doing it.
That's right.
All the time. And also working part-time at Bed Bath & Beyond. and then he screws up his call sheet at Bed Bath & Beyond for what he would tell the squad room at the police department. It's like, oh, there's a rapist loose. And I was like, oh, that's not for you guys. Well, you should know anyway. It's just Keaton he's great. He's great in that movie. Everyone brings their A game.
Yeah.
I will say that Ferrell hasn't made a ton of good movies since The Other Guys. That's a little jarring to go back at his filmography. And he certainly hasn't starred in many good movies. He was in the Lego movie, which I liked, and its sequel, which I liked less.
Okay.
But he's not the star. He's the villain. And then he was the villain in Barbie as well. The rest of it's like Daddy's Home, Daddy's Home 2. No, thank you. The Campaign, which stay tuned. We'll talk about that one. Big flop, but a movie I remember enjoying. But you got to like Zach Galifianakis and his brand of comedy to really enjoy it.
Okay.
Zoolander 2, which unfortunately sucks donkey dick. And Holmes and Watson, which is apparently the worst movie ever made. I've never seen it.
Oh.
The trailer cracked me up. I do remember that much, but it was apparently like, it's almost unfinished. Like they released it in that state.
Oh.
But there's a scene in the trailer where a bunch of bees are swarming them and they start shooting at them, which I thought was just hilarious. Because then the beekeeper did that for real. Like it was supposed to be sad because they start shooting a beehive. Man, that movie's hilarious. You guys got to watch The Beekeeper if you haven't. Yeah, but he's got You're Cordially Invited coming in January 2025, apparently, so not too far out. And Despicable Me 4, which is out now. It wasn't at the time I wrote that, but it is now.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess he's playing the bad guy, which I thought Steve Carell was the bad guy, but apparently he's not.
Oh,
he's the good guy
no
now.
idea.
Who fucking knows? I don't like a minion. I would eat a minion. I bet they taste good. So yeah, Anna Friel, we mentioned. Oh yeah, this is all in my little blurb here. She was in Pushing Daisies, Marcella. She's appeared on The Girlfriend Experience, which was a spinoff of a Soderbergh movie, and Monarch, but not the monster one, not the Apple TV one, a different one. She's got My Sister's Bones, which is a movie coming out at some point, and a series called The Perfect Girlfriend in production now. And then with McBride, I wanted to shout him out here because I'm a little shocked. He's only really acted in The Righteous Gemstones for the past like 5 or 6 years. He did the Alien movie, but he's been writing horror movie reboots.
I saw that in your notes.
Yeah, he did the Halloween ones with David Gordon Green, who was his director on Pineapple Express. But he also did, David Gordon Green, I think, also made All the Real Girls, which is a underrated movie. But then he has a story by credit on The Exorcist, the 2023 Exorcist movie that just came out, Believer. But he wrote the 2018 Halloween and both its sequels. So that's where he's at now. He's just rebooting horror franchises.
That's cool. You know what? I love that for him. I heard a little bit about his background, and like when he came out to LA for the first time as a young man, he was trying to be a screenwriter. He wasn't even trying to be an actor. The only reason he started in Foot Fist Way was because he was just like an indie filmmaker and he had to act in his own.
Right. It was out of necessity, not like
in his own thing. And yeah, I think he told this to Marin or something. That's why I heard that secondhand, that he was trying to pitch weird sci-fi conceptual shit. And people were like, who is this little punk kid trying to write high concept sci-fi and horror shit? So it's really cool that he's come full circle and he gets to write scripts for shit like Halloween.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Good for him. Yeah. He maybe that's what he really loves doing. And he's acting still, but it's just on The Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah. Which is enough. He gets tons of praise for what he's doing there.
That's my favorite Danny McBride show. If you watched like Eastbound and Down, Vice Principals, that's the one I connect with the most. I think it's the funniest and it's got the best story in my opinion. And I love that Walton Goggins just keeps popping up in all these shows. He was great in Vice Principals and now he's Uncle Baby Billy on Righteous Gemstones. Just the role of a lifetime, but for Walton Goggins, it's just another credit.
Just another one. Yeah, I think you said that before on this show. I still haven't seen him on that. I was a big fan of Eastbound and Down back in the day, so glad to see that McBride's still doing it.
All right. Do you want to hear what we're covering next episode?
I sure do.
We are doing our first, I'm pretty sure, Cronenberg. It's hard to remember now because we've got 128 episodes in the bank. But yeah, we're doing a Cronenberg. We're doing Cosmopolis from 2018, I believe.
Cronenberg.
Oh, no, it's 2012. It's 2012. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, yeah, but listen to the cast. It's got Robert Pattinson, Paul Giamatti, Jay Baruchel, Kevin Durand. I love Kevin Durand. One of my favorite character actors. Samantha Morton, Sarah Gadon, Juliette Binoche. He's stacked. And it's based on Cosmopolis by Don DeLillo, and adapting Don DeLillo novels never goes badly.
No, that's a super easy straight line to Hollywood success.
It basically writes itself, the adaptations of DeLillo. No, did anyone see the White Noise movie?
I watched 20 minutes of it and I just couldn't
do it, right? Yeah, I couldn't do it either. I wanted to. The trailer was good. The movie, not so much. But yeah, it's our first Cronenberg. It had a $21 million budget, only made 7, so firmly in the blast zone. But that should be a fun one. Not a fun one, an interesting one.
Really interesting. I didn't even know it was DeLillo. I didn't know anything about it.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe if you haven't already. You can review us on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a rating on Spotify.
That'd be so nice.
We've been stuck at the same number of reviews for a couple months months now. We'd like to get
All
some
right.
new ones in there. If you have any movie requests, suggestions, feedback on the show, questions for us, email us blastzonepod@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Twitter @blastzonepod, and we're active on Instagram again.
Ooh, branching out.
Get after that. Blast Zone Pod on Instagram as well.
Social medias are popping off.
I might try to get the TikTok going. Who knows? We got 127 little headliner videos that could just plop on there.
Good idea.
Yeah, so look for us on your social media apps. We're really trying to grow the show, and we love doing this. We want as many people as possible to love it with us.
Nice to be heard.
That's it. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.